Since the early 1900s, animation has been a beloved art medium that has brought hundreds of stories to screens around the world. There are dozens of studios in our modern age that create animated movies for everyone to enjoy. From Disney Animation to Sony Pictures, there is no absence of animation in modern media. Nowadays, most animated movies are 3D animated, meaning that most of the assets on the screen are CGI models, created, rigged, and rendered in a 3D space in order to move in a way that appears realistic to viewers. Of course, this wasn't always the case. Before computer animation, there was pencil and paper and thousands upon thousands of drawings to create a moving picture. A strong foundation of modern animation comes from the 2D origins, but unfortunately, 2D animated features have been less abundant over the last few years as modern technology advances and allows for more realistic and innovative visuals in 3D. Due to the lack of full-length 2D movies, many may state that 2D animation is dead, left to only be used for children's TV series and commercials, but this simply isn't true. Despite the lack of full 2D animated movies, 2D and 3D animation have started to work hand in hand to create amazing new and innovative films. Let's take a step back. The story of 2D animation started way back in 1908 with Emile Cole. Dubbed the father of animation, Cole is credited to have created the first 2D animated short, Phantasmagorie. The film is barely over a minute long and has a relatively vague storyline to it, following the antics of a clown-like character. To create the film, Emile Cole made 700 drawings by placing each drawing over a light board and tracing the last. This was how Cole was able to create the illusion of movement. This short would be the film that get the ball rolling for animation. From here, we would only see the rise of many more artists coming into the field to jump onto this new form of art expression. One of these artists would be Winsor McCay, who would eventually become known as the father of American animation, specifically through his animated short, Gertie the Dinosaur. The short shows McCay as he presents the cartoon dinosaur to a table of friends, asking the beast to perform for them. The charming short would showcase some of the first uses of keyframes, tracing paper, and animation loops. Later, the Fleischer brothers would start to create shorts with characters like Coco the Clown, Popeye the Sailor Man, and Betty Boop. Pat Sullivan would gain some popularity with the mischievous Felix the Cat, and Walt Disney would be met with quite a positive reaction towards his creation, Mickey Mouse. During the 1920s and 1930s, animation became a desired form of entertainment for the public. The illusion of moving drawings captured the attention of audiences and would influence these animators to form animation studios. This led to the rise of studios such as John Bray Studios and Fleischer Studios, or even more well-known studios such as Warner Brothers, MGM, and of course, Walt Disney Studios. As animation rose in popularity and technology became more advanced and easier to access, more innovative ways were made in order to create more interesting and intricate animation pieces. The PEG system and cells were created to make drawing a large number of frames easier for the animators. The first short with synchronized sound was created via Steamboat Willie, and soon after the first animations with color would begin to appear via Fiddlesticks by Ub Iwerks and Flowers and Trees by Disney Studios. Eventually, even the modes of capturing the images were advanced as well. The multiplane camera is a long way from the magic lantern that was originally used to project these films. All was looking well for animation, but the thing that really pushed animation forward as a popular form of entertainment would be the release of the first full-length animated movie in the US, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Making a total of $8 million upon its initial release, the movie made Walt Disney Studios a profit of $6.5 million and was the highest-grossing film of 1937. The film would be the first of many full-length feature animated films. For the next 40 years, animation would cement itself in the entertainment industry as a fun and creative medium. 2D animation, that is. But then came along 3D animation wouldn't be officially created until the 1960s, when William Fetter, employee at Boeing, would begin to create short videos of pilots in simulated cockpits for the company to understand the 3D models better. His work would become known as the first instance of moving 3D computer-generated images. A few years later, at the University of Utah, Frederick Park produced a short known as Face and Body Parts, demonstrating computer-generated facial expressions. Park's peer, Ed Catmull, would render the first 3D computer-generated hand, and the two would later work together on major motion picture Future World, the first film known to have incorporated 3D animations. From here, 3D animation only became more popular. Soon after the first use of 3D animation in film, Pixar was founded within Lucas Studios, as George Lucas recruited Ed Catmull and others to help further the exploration of computer graphics. It would be the integration of 3D animation in the popular Star Wars films that would skyrocket the medium into orbit. Pixar soon would become its own separate studio, in 1986 being purchased by Steve Jobs. They started to create 3D animated shorts, but would mainly work on commercials. That is until they produced their first full feature-length film, Toy Story. Toy Story was released at the end of 1995 and became the second highest grossing film of the year. The success of the film would lead the studio to start prioritizing making feature films. 2 years later, Pixar would make a deal with Walt Disney Studios to jointly produce 5 movies over the next 10 years, the start of a long partnership with the company. Toy Story's success proved to studios that 3D animation was a tool that they should start to use, and would soon lead to the integration of the medium in 2D animated films. CGI started to be used to create 3D aspects and can be seen in films like The Great Mouse Detectives, Oliver and Company, and The Little Mermaid. Disney eventually began to release its own 3D films, Chicken Little being the company's first full 3D animated film. The film turned out to be a flop, alongside their next CGI film, Meet the Robinsons. Disney would briefly return to 2D animation, coming out with films like Lilo and Stitch, Brother Bear, and the infamously unsuccessful but great movie Treasure Planet. The 2D films were no longer bringing the money they used to. Meanwhile, Pixar was having blockbuster hit one after another. It would be Disney's film, Bold, that would finally give the studio the boost and template needed to succeed within the 3D space. From there, Disney would find success with films like Tangled and Frozen. The studio's last 2D animated film would be Winnie the Pooh, a film that gets overshadowed by its more successful predecessor, The Princess and the Frog, which was released 2 years before. By now, Disney was a juggernaut in the entertainment industry, and whatever they decided to do would eventually be copied by other studios around them. 2D animation was soon pushed aside, appearing to be no longer as popular or desired as the advanced technology of 3D animation. 2D animated films are scarce nowadays, most animated films being 3D, but there are still a few pieces coming out, and their popularity with audiences shows how 2D is still a beloved style of animation. Recently, in 2023, world-renowned anime studio Studio Ghibli released the film The Boy and the Heron. The film was received wonderfully and would go on to win the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature, beating out 3D films like Pixar's Elemental, Netflix's Nimona, and Sony Pictures' Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. 2D is still a popular medium, especially among still airing streaming series. Current popular 2D series include shows like anime One Piece, Fiona and Cake, and preschool show Bluey. There are plenty of series that are no longer airing but are still beloved that are also keeping 2D alive, such as shows like Adventure Time, Gravity Falls, and Avatar: The Last Airbender. Independent studios on YouTube are also producing animated 2D pilots and shows, receiving millions of views and amazing support from the people watching. These shows include Helluva Boss, Ramshackle, and Lackadaisy. Finally, 2D animation and 3D animation have started to work together to continue making the animation medium interesting and fresh for audiences. Films like Spider-Man, Into and Across the Spider-Verse, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish incorporate 2D animation into their films in order to make a new and interesting style. 3D animation has reached a point where it looks very realistic, hitting a dead end in innovation. So studios have started to go for a more stylized approach in their animation, and 2D is helping to do this. Fully 2D animated feature films are no longer being produced by big studios, sure, but the style is still alive and loved by people all around. 2D is an important style in the industry and will help push animation forward in the future.